स्वाध्याय टीवी। डॉक्टर बाबा साहेब आंबेडकर ओपन यूनिवर्सिटी।
Namaskar. Welcome. In the series of lectures, the topic is cost accounting and this precise topic of operating costing. In the previous lectures and the previous sessions, we discussed the theory of operating costing. What is operating costing, which type of businesses and the company who can actually deal with the operating costing, and what are the main objective behind to prepare of operating costing. As we understood in the last sessions that the operating costing is useful for the people who are actually involving with the service sector or a service provider. Precisely the people who are actually providing a services like a transport services, hotel business and hotel services, hospital business, hospital related services, canteen, theaters, electric power generations and supply services. So, those who are actually providing services regarding the basic requirements, like a transport is a basic requirement. Okay. So, in this type of businesses and service providers willing to know that the what type of cost for providing their services and how much amount of cost incurred to provide the services on the basis of their unit identified or unit of the particular services. And then the what amount of profitability can be added in that particular services to provide a exact amount of a charge can be asked from the service taker. So, the people who are interested to take a services, how much amount of service, how much amount of charge they can pay for the respected services, that they are willing to know that. But before that, they need to identify the cost of each services. So, we were discussed in the last sessions all about these objectives and the characteristics of operating cost, as well as the structure of operating cost, how the operating cost schedule and the operating cost format has been prepared. As we already discussed in the last session, that operating costing basically divided into a two part, as it can be divided into a three part also, but basically there are two major partition of the whole cost structures. One is the fixed cost and the second is variable cost or a running cost. Variable cost, further you can classify major two parts also. One is an operating variable expenditures of to a certain level of variable expenditures or the semi variable expenditures. And in that case, we can consider the repairs and maintenance or a depreciation is a part of semi variable expenditures, or other expenditures it is purely a variable expenses which are purely based on expenses calculated on the basis of the running vehicle or running of services per basis per unit. So, the first part is fixed cost. The fixed cost means the cost which are incurred whether the services is on, that means the services is running or not. So, the expenditures which are actually incurred on the basis of the fixed charges would be considered the first part of operating cost format, that is the fixed cost. Second part is variable expenses, that means the all expenditures which are calculated based on the vehicle running per kilometer or maybe the services running basis. It means that if the services are on, if the services are running, then that this cost would be incurred. So, the second part of the cost is a variable cost, and that we need to identify. That means, when we are going to find out the cost of the operating services, we need to identify the two major important role. The first is the services which are having a fixed cost and the services which are having a running cost or a variable cost. That means, the whole cost structure has been divided into a two part majorly. And according to that calculations, we need to identify the cost of fixed as well as variable per particular period. That means, maybe which we are going to calculate it per monthly basis or quarterly basis, maybe a biannual basis or on a annual basis also. So, we need to calculate the cost as per the requirement of the service provider or as per the cost has been identified or the quotations is required by the third party who is willing to take these services or willing to hire these services. So, this is what we are going to discuss in this sessions onwards. So, we need to calculate the cost of the each service provider or each different type of services. Today, we are going to start first the cost calculations or operating cost calculations for the road transport services. It may be a goods transport or a passenger transport. We will discuss one by one passenger transport questions and goods transport questions in the respected sessions. Then we will take another services also, but today we are going to start by the goods transport services. So, let us begin with the first problem of the goods transport services which we are actually discussing about them. So, here the question is the goods transport services related to the part of this question. The question is a transport company which keeps one truck gives the following information. That means, we are actually discussing here the goods transport costing. We are preparing a operating cost for the goods transport services. For that, we see the different type of informations available in this question. First is estimated life of the truck is 2 lakh kilometers. It means that the whatever the trucks company is having, that is their estimated life is maximum 2 lakh kilometers total life of the truck. Annual mileage of the truck is 60,000 kilometers. That means, the truck runs annually 60,000 kilometers in a year. Then what is the value of truck? The value of truck is rupees 50,000. This would be helpful for the calculation of a depreciation. Value of truck is actually helpful for the calculation of depreciation. Then the driver's salary per hour. Now, these are the informations which need to identify whether it is a fixed cost or a variable cost, and you can identify the cost as per their information. You can easily actually evaluate that whether this cost is a variable cost or a fixed cost as per the information given in the question. Here the driver's salary is given, that is 6 rupees, but it is given per hour. So, if it is given per hour, it means it is clearly said that we need to calculate the driver salary as per the variable expenses because of it is given information per hourly basis. So, we need to calculate a driver salary on the basis of hourly, which actually how many kilometers runs per hour, and on the basis of that we need to calculate the driver's salary, and that is why it is considered as a variable expenses. Next is petrol per gallon. Petrol expenses per gallon is given, that is why you can say that this is also a variable expenses. Anyway, also it is variable expenses because of petrol consumption is actually calculated on the basis of vehicle runs. So, when vehicle is actually in operating mode, then and then only the petrol will consume, and that is why it is purely based on variable expenses. Repairs is given per kilometers. Now, repairs you can calculate it by two ways. Either maybe it is calculated on the basis of a fixed charges also, or sometimes it is calculated on the variable charges also. Here it is calculated on the basis of variable charges because of it is clearly mentioned repairs per kilometer, and that is why the repairs charges would be calculated on a variable charges. The next is tire and tube expenses per kilometer, which is also calculated variable expenses because of tire and tubes is also given per kilometer. So, these first 4 expenses are calculated variable expenses. Now, moving to the next part, annual expenses. Annual expenses are actually clearly given annual basis. So, that means license expense, insurance expense, garage rent, supervisor salary. These are the expenses incurred on an annual basis, and which are very clearly mentioned that these expenses are incurred annual basis. That is why it is a fixed cost and fixed charges. Moving to the next part, that is truck runs 20 kilometers per hour. Fine. This would be helpful for the calculation of both the things. One is driver's salary and the second is petrol expenses. Why? Because of the driver's salary is actually calculated per hour basis, and this truck runs 20 kilometers per hour. So, that is why we need to calculate the how much amount of driver's salary paid on hourly basis. Then the next is charge interest at 5% on capital. Here the cost of truck is given in this question, that is 50,000 rupees, and charge interest at 5% on capital. So we assume that the total amount of investment in whole business is about 50,000 rupees. And so that is why the 5% interest on capital would be charged, and this is your fixed expenses. It is a hidden item, it is not clearly mentioned in the question. We need to identify certain hidden items from the question, and whether it is a fixed expense or a variable expense, that also to be identified from the question itself only. Here it is interest on capital is given, value of truck is 50,000, interest on capital is 5%. So straight away you can calculate it 5% on 50,000, and which is calculated annum per annum basis, and that is why it is a fixed charges. The moving to the next part is truck runs 20 kilometers per gallon. Here again it is said it would be helpful to calculate a petrol cost, how much petrol cost is incurred on the basis of a per gallon, and that would be helpful to calculate a petrol cost. Again it is a variable cost, and we will be find out the variable cost on the basis of the certain hidden items or hidden informations. Prepare a statement of operating cost. How you can prepare the statement of operating cost on the basis of this certain informations. Now the information is clearly mentioned. This information is given of per truck. Now per truck information is actually value of truck is given, actual mileage runs per hour is actual mileage per hour is given, annually how many kilometers runs by this truck, that is also clearly given, expected life of the truck is also given in this question. So these informations would be helpful for the calculation of depreciation. Interest on capital is given in the last paragraph. This would be helpful for the calculation of interest on capital, which is again a fixed cost. This certain expenses are mentioned in the question in two parts. One information is given the expenses per kilometer, or maybe a per hour, or maybe a per mileage. So on the basis of this we would be easily identified this kilometers expenses would be considered as a variable cost. So it would be directly write down under the heading of a variable cost. Then the second part of the question is given the sum and expenses paid on an annual basis, license fees, then road tax, then other part of an expenditure, supervisor salary. So these are the expenses mentioned clearly in this question on an annual basis. So it is paid annually. It is clearly said that it is a fixed cost. So in this sense we need to prepare the operating cost statement, and on the basis of the statement we need to find out the operating cost of this truck per kilometer or per mile. Now two important things before we start this question. One, whether we have an operating kilometers clearly mentioned in the question or not. Here the company is having only one truck, and their effective actual mileage is 60,000 kilometers per annum. So that means their actual mileage runs in this particular year or a particular period is 60,000 kilometers. So that means we have an actual mileage or effective mileage is remains same only. There would be no differences. So it would be coming in the next questions, maybe actual mileage or effective mileage would be differ. Why I am actually raising this point in this question itself only, because of if actual mileage and effective mileage is differ, then the cost would be also calculated on the basis of a certain different parameters. Suppose petrol cost would be calculated on the basis of actual mileage only, where the certain expenditures would be calculated on the basis of effective mileage only. So that is why we need to identify whether in this question actual mileage or effective mileage is remain same or not. In this question there would be no differences, actual mileage and effective mileage is remain same. So now we will calculate the operating cost in the precise format. The format which we have already discussed in the last session, the operating cost sheet would be prepared in the three columns: particulars, then actual expenses incurred on the particular period base. Here it is mentioned on an annual basis, that is why the second column annual expenditures is going to write, and the third column is the expenses which we need to find out per unit. Now see the expenses and operating cost statement, how we can prepare the operating cost statement. Here the operating cost statement, the title of the operating cost statement is Transport Company Operating Cost Sheet. And the two important informations which we are going to take it from the question. See here the question, first information is estimated life is 2 lakh kilometers and annual mileage is which we are actually having, that is 60,000 kilometers. Now see here the 60,000 kilometers is actually effective mileage, and see the see in the operating cost sheet in the answer solution, estimated life in kilometers 2 lakh and the distance travelled in a year, that is 60,000 kilometers. Now see the question once again. As the answers it shows very clearly the questions divided into a two part. The first part is a fixed cost and the second part is a variable cost. So it means we need to start the solution from the fixed cost itself only, which is actually given here in the second part. So now according to the second part of the annual expenses, here we will actually find out the information. The annual expenses are license fees, insurance, garage rent and supervisor's salary. So these four expenditures are paid on an annual basis. 1000 license expenses. Now see in the sheet, the license expenses annually paid rupees 1000 would be recorded under the fixed cost. Then the insurance expenses paid for the truck, it's rupees 1100, again it is paid annually, so it would be recorded under the fixed cost only, that is insurance charges 1100 rupees. Then the next is garage rent, which is actually given 800 rupees annually paid. It is again it is considered as a fixed cost, garage rent rupees 800. Let us see, these are the expenses paid on an annual basis, and generally these expenditures are actually considered as a fixed expenses only. Why? Because of the license expenses is actually required to run your vehicle on a road, right? So that means it is actually clearly said that it's, if you want to work on the street or your vehicle is actually going to work on a road, so it means you need to have a license with you. Without RTO license you cannot actually run your vehicle on the street. So that means you need to have a license. The second is insurance. Your truck or maybe vehicle is required a full insurance, because of whenever it's required the any repairs and maintenance, or maybe in a case of any accidental possibilities, you need to have your insurance also, which will be protect third party insurance as well as your vehicle insurance also. But these expenditures paid on an annual basis, which is compulsory whether your vehicle is in operating mode or not. These all the things are required for your transport company, and that is why these expenses is considered as a fixed expenses. Garage rent. So garage is required because of you need to have the proper protections of your vehicle, and that is why you need to have a garage. Suppose if you don't have a garage, you can hire the garage to put your vehicle in this particular garage. So that's why you need to pay a rent. So the garage people are always asked rent on a monthly basis, on a yearly basis. Whether your vehicle is put in the garage or not, that is not required, but you need to have a vehicle garage required, and that's why the garage rent is considered as a fixed expense. So we need to identify the feature or basic understanding of the cost. On the basis of that only you can identify or discriminate whether it is a fixed cost or a variable cost. This would be helpful to calculate the fixed and variable on the basis of the nature of the expenses. Now see once again the table how you can actually find out the expenditures bifurcation. See here the all first four expenditures, license, insurance, garage rent and supervisors expenses are clearly recorded in the table under the heading of a fixed expenses, and their annual expenses are mentioned in the second column in front of the respected expenses, whether it is a 1000 rupees, 1100, 800 or 1500 rupees. Now the fifth expenses which are not clearly mentioned, see in the last line that is given the charge interest at 5% on capital. So we assume that the total amount of investment in this question is given only 50,000 because of the value of truck is 50,000. So now see the fifth point, fifth item under the fixed cost, that is interest on capital. So interest on capital is charged 50,000 5% rate of interest. So on the basis of this we need to find out the calculation of 50,000 at the rate 5%, that is 2,500 rupees, and 2,500 rupees which would consider as an interest on capital under the fixed cost. Now these are the fixed expenses written under the heading of fixed cost. Now moving to the second part. Now see here the total fixed cost is the total amount of annual expenses of under the heading of fixed cost, that is 6,900 rupees. You may be raised the question how you find out 0.115 total fixed cost, that is per unit cost. Now per unit cost it means the per kilometer, unit here it is kilometer. So that's why the per unit cost you can identify it very easily. 6,900 rupees it's a total fixed cost. How much actually distance travelled by this truck on a annual basis, that is 60,000. So 6,900 rupees is a total fixed cost divided by annual mileage 60,000, your answer would be 0.115, that is your per unit cost, or you can say per kilometer cost. You can identify your per unit cost or per kilometer cost with the clear cut formula, the total fixed cost divided by your actual effective mileage runs per annum or per period. Here per year kilometer runs by this truck is 60,000, so 6,900 divided by 60,000 kilometers. Now moving to the second part, variable expenses. Variable expenses which we already identified from the question is, one is driver salary, it is a variable expense, petrol is also variable expense, repair is variable expense which is clearly given in the question, it is not hidden also, 0.25 per kilometer. Tire and tube expenses is also clearly mentioned, that is 0.10 per kilometer. So these are the variable expense, and one more item which is actually not clearly mentioned, that is depreciation. We would calculate depreciation on the basis of the actual mileage runs by this vehicle. Now see the answer. Variable cost is the second part, that is running cost also. Start with the driver salary. Driver salary, now for that we need to see the question. How you can find out the driver salary? See the question, driver salary per hour is given rupees 6, that is first part. Now see the last line, truck runs 20 kilometers per hour, it means that the driver would get the salary 6 rupees per hour, and that runs 20 kilometers. How much actually total kilometer runs by this vehicle? Now see the this truck actually runs 60,000 kilometers per annum. Okay, so here the per annum 60,000 kilometers it's run, we need to put some equation like this. See here in the working, first working shows the driver salary calculation. It is charged rupees 6 per hour, that is right, it is given in the question. Again the another information is also given in the question, that is truck runs 20 kilometers per hour, and the third item is total kilometer runs by this truck in a year, it's 60,000 kilometer. It means this three information is clearly given in the question. On the basis of these three informations, we will put a simple equation. If the truck runs 20 kilometers, drivers would get 6 rupees for that. Why? Because of we can easily compare that the company will pay 6 rupees per hour, and the truck runs actually 20 kilometers in an hour. So it means that you can easily compare this, the company paid 6 rupees for 20 kilometers because of the truck runs 20 per hour 20 kilometers, as well as company paid 6 rupees per hour. So we can put it in equation like this, if truck runs 20 kilometers will pay rupees 6 per hour, then 60,000 kilometers if it runs, how much amount will pay? That is 18,000. See, the 18,000 rupees is calculated on the basis of this equation, and on the basis of this equation 18,000 would be write down here in this format. See the variable cost under the heading variable cost, driver salary paid annually 18,000. Why it is actually considered annually? Because of the 60,000 kilometers is actually runs by this vehicle on an annual basis, and that's why we calculated annual expenses, and 18,000 it's an annual expense because of 60,000 kilometer runs this vehicle on an annual basis. Now 18,000 rupees it's a cost on an annual expenses. If you want to find out per kilometer, again you can divide it by 60,000 kilometers which is actually annually run by this vehicle. So 18,000 divided by 60,000, see your answer per unit cost, that is per kilometer cost, that is 0.30. 18,000 divided by 60,000 kilometers. So 0.3 rupees it is a driver salary per kilometer. Now see the second item, petrol per gallon. Petrol per gallon it's rupees 5. Now see the last paragraph, that the trucks runs 20 kilometers per gallon. Here these two information would be very much helpful for the calculation of petrol cost, and the another information is annual mileage. So these three information would be very much helpful for calculation of petrol cost. See here the second working, petrol cost. The vehicle actually vehicle required rupees 5 per gallon, because of the petrol cost is 5 rupees per gallon. Truck runs 20 kilometer per gallon, so it means you can easily compare that the company is having an average of 20 kilometers runs rupees 5 cost. it means that the 5 rupees per gallon, it runs 20 kilometers. So, you can easily compare with the 60,000 kilometer. How much total kilometer runs by this truck in a year? It is 60,000. So, we can easily put a simple equation like this. If the truck runs 20 kilometers, the petrol cost is rupees 5. Then 60,000 kilometers run, how much total amount of petrol cost in a year? That is 15,000 rupees. So, the 15,000 rupees, it is a petrol cost in a year, or you can say it is an annual cost of petrol, that is 15,000 in front of petrol cost in under the heading of variable expenses in the annual expense column. And you can find out easily variable expenses per kilometer also, per unit also. 15,000 rupees divided by 60,000 kilometers in a year, which comes to 0.25. You can see, you can find out this 0.25 directly also, if you want to find out how much actually petrol cost per gallon, that is 5 rupees. How much, what is an average of truck per gallon, that is 20. So, 5 rupees divided by 20 kilometers, you can directly divide this and you can find out the 0.25 petrol cost also. So, the another way also you can find out the petrol cost, 5 rupees divided by the 20 kilometers, your answer would be 0.25. So, this is your second item, petrol cost. Now, see the third item, repairs per kilometer. It is clearly given 0.25. So, you can directly write down in the table, repair cost is 0.25. See the third column, per unit cost, per kilometer cost, in front of repair cost it is 0.25. If you want to find out the annual expenses, you can easily find out 0.25 multiplied by 60,000 kilometers. What we did actually in the previous two cases, driver salary and petrol cost, we find out annual expense and then divided by the effective mileage 60,000 kilometers. So, we find out the per kilometer cost. Here in this case, in repairs cost, we have an per kilometer cost. If you want to find out annual expense, you can do it reverse, multiplied by the number of kilometers effectively runs in this particular period. So, 0.25 multiplied by 60,000, your answer of repairs cost would be 15,000 rupees. Now, moving to the next point, that is tire and tube expenses, which is also given per kilometer. So, directly you can write tire and tube cost rupees 0.10. See in front of tire and tube cost in the last column, per unit cost 0.10 and multiplied by 60,000 kilometers. So, you can easily identify your cost per period, per mile, per annum. So, that is 6,000 rupees. Now, moving to the next and a very important part, which is not clearly given in the question, that is depreciation. Depreciation would be calculated on the basis of a certain information. First information is the value of truck is rupees 50,000. So, this would be helpful for the calculation of depreciation. Second information is annual mileage, how many kilometer runs by this vehicle per annum, and the third information is estimated life of this vehicle. Now, see the working number 3. Depreciation. 3 information we need for the calculation of depreciation, which is very clearly given in the question, that is life of vehicle, annual mileage of vehicle and the cost of vehicle. Now, we will have to put a very simple equation, that is if a vehicle runs 2 lakh kilometers, their value of cost of vehicle is rupees 50,000. Then if it runs 60,000 kilometers in a year, what would be the cost per annum? And then the cost cross multiplication, we can easily find out the depreciation value, which is 15,000 rupees. Now, this 15,000 rupees depreciation is on an annual basis, which would be written in front of depreciation under the heading of variable expenses in annual expense column. If you want to find out the depreciation directly, you can find out depreciation directly also, which you can find out that the 60,000 kilometers, 50,000 is actually a cost of vehicle divided by the number of kilometers of estimated life, that is 2 lakh kilometers. So, 50,000 divided by 2 lakh, you can easily find out the cost of depreciation would be 0.25, and this 0.25 depreciation, it's per unit cost or per mileage cost. Now, this is the way we calculated the variable cost. Including hidden items which are not clearly given in the question, we find out the fixed cost as well as the variable cost. Now, total of the variable cost, only B column, only B part, variable cost total, that is 69,000 rupees. all the 5 costs including depreciation, 69,000 rupees is the total variable cost, and divided by the 60,000 effective mileage, which comes to 1.15 rupees per kilometer cost, per unit cost or per kilometer. Unit is here kilometer, and that is why the variable cost per kilometer is rupees 1.15. Now, the total operating cost is A plus B, that means total fixed cost plus total variable cost, which comes to 75,900 divided by 60,000 kilometers, and operating cost per unit or per kilometer, that is 1.265. So, this is the way which you can find out the operating cost. Again, we were actually trying to do simple way, that we actually find out the which are the fixed costs in this question, which are the variable cost in this question. We just find out the clear cut fixed cost which are mentioned in this question, write down on the first part of the solution. Then we find out the variable cost variable cost which are clearly mentioned in the question, write down in the second part of the question. Maybe the certain informations which are not clearly mentioned, we need to calculate it, or maybe which not clearly identified also, whether it is a fixed cost or a variable cost. Then we will apply the nature of the expenses or nature of the cost. On the basis of the nature of the cost, we find out whether it is a fixed cost or a variable cost, and write down under the respected head. Then we need to find out the variable cost and fixed cost per unit per kilometer. How you can identify it? If you have a total amount of periodical expense, then the total periodical expense divided by the effective mileage or actual mileage which are given in the question, then you can identify your per unit cost, that is per kilometer cost. Then the second part, the per variable cost, also we need to identify few missing items which we need to compare and put it to some simple equation. Some period of time maybe the petrol cost is not clearly mentioned, then we need to identify whether it is given per kilometer or per gallon. Then we need to compare the equation, and on the basis of equation we find out the petrol expenses. Same way we find out the driver expenses also per kilometer, and then we try to put it these expenditures on a respected column, whether it is given on a per kilometer or maybe annual basis. Then we find out the total variable expenses, and at last we merge the fixed expenses and operating expenses total divided by the number of kilometers runs by this vehicle in a particular period, whether it is an annual basis or a monthly basis or on a particular basis. We divide this kilometers to the total cost. It is your final answer, that is operating cost per unit per kilometer. Per kilometer, it is a unit in this particular question, and that is why the answer of operating cost is per kilometer, that is 1.265 per kilometer. So, this is a very simple question. I just wanted to inform you and explain you how operating cost statement can be prepared. So, through this question you just try to identify the few important things. One, after you are just going to read this question, you need to identify it first which are the expenses clearly mentioned in the question, that is the first part. Second, you need to bifurcate the expenses, whether it is a fixed cost or a variable cost. Third important thing, which are the expenses given on the calculation on the basis of effective mileage or actual mileage. So, you need to calculate it, the petrol expense, repairs and maintenance, tires and tubes allocations, depreciation, interest on capital. These are the expenses may not be given clearly, we need to calculate it first, and on the basis of that we need to identify whether it is a fixed or variable expenses. And another important thing is, the next question onwards may be coming also, if the company is having more than one vehicle, then there would be a difference of actual mileage and effective mileage. So, how much actual mileage kilometers, how much effective mileage, and on the basis of these differences we need to calculate it the per unit cost as well as per particular variable cost. So, these are the important things before you start find out the solution of this question. This is what I want to explain in the first problem in this particular operating cost statement. Thank you very much.
स्वाध्याय टीवी